Thank you very much for joining us. Once again, you have 2 minutes, and yourself, make your case.
Hello everybody, I'm Michał, and I propose this question kind of hastily in the last possible moment. But it's because I feel quite strongly that ACTA, which, just to give you a brief overview, is a policy that would enforce tighter regulations on intellectual property laws, has the potential to lead to massive policing of people's privacy. And yes, it was already signed by the UK, but to give you an example, the Polish ambassador in Tokyo did sign it, and now, due to protests in the country, they're actually going to try to withdraw it from going through the Parliament, and the European Parliament isn't debating it for the next couple of months. So it might seem that it's too late, but there's still stuff that we can do. And I'll say more, I guess, in responses to the questions. Thank you.
Well, in the interest of transparency and open debate, I'll keep my comments rather brief, partly because I didn't know what ACTA was until Philip explained it to me down there, but the reason it's very important I'm going to ask you to vote no to this question is not an issue to do with counterfeiting trade agreement or anything like that. It's actually to do with the fact that EUSA exists legally, as well as just socially as an organisation, to facilitate and represent students in their capacity as students. And this is not an issue which I think is relevant to the work that EUSA does or what EUSA is. Nor do I think that EUSA is the body who should be facilitating students' views on this issue if it is something that students feel strongly about. Having said that, I think it's very important we punch above our weight, as it were, campaign on national issues. We campaign very hard on a range of issues, but again, they're all things which affect students as students. And actually, for us to campaign and spend any money or any resource on this campaign would actually be in breach of the Charities and Trustees Act of 2005, which very clearly states that we, as a charity, have to do things in the charitable interests of our members, and I'm afraid this is just not one of those. So I appreciate you bringing forward the question. I think it's an interesting issue, but I'm sorry, this is just something which EUSA should not be worrying about.
Thank you. Yes, pause please. So this is not an issue that affects students as students. It's not EUSA's responsibility, and it could get you into an awful lot of trouble with charitable law. Okay, some people who haven't spoken yet.
So the anti-counterfeiting trade agreement has arguably some quite severe implications in terms of censorship expressed on the internet and of knowledge, which is, I think, something which is very important to students. It's something that's definitely in students' interests, and therefore we will have the EUSA's rights to fight to protect the freedom of knowledge and the freedom of the internet from censorship. Would you like to respond to that?
So actually this directly affects students, and it's about censorship.
The fact this spreads knowledge, there are a vast number of institutions and mediums through which knowledge can be exchanged. The question here is not whether that's a good thing or a bad thing or not. The real issue is the fact that I'm afraid EUSA cannot campaign on issues to do with legislation on anti-counterfeiting on behalf of its members, because it is something which doesn't damage them in their capacity as students. I'm sorry, but this is an issue which is... There are many issues which we should be campaigning on. We have huge fees for the rest of UK students. We've got rising international student fees. We've got the fact that people can nowhere sit in the library. The fact that it costs students a fortune to get to class if they study veterinary medicine. There are a range of issues, and I just think that this is an unnecessary distraction to the real work that needs to be done. And so I'm sorry if that sounds a little strong, but there's a reason it's not something that students are banging on my door about.
Okay, so it's an issue, but it's just not a priority right now.
Well, as the person from the audience did say, we are in a university and we are primarily dealing with information which we have to obtain from various sources. and we have to be able to exchange information to some degree, to be able to work on groups and projects, and to be able to campaign on other issues as well. Because if we don't put it through in the way of information, I mean, how can we put it through? And I appreciate your point that there might be more academic-related issues, but I don't think it stops us from, should be stopping EUSA from raising awareness of those things, because frankly, when I was going through and trying to collect the 100 signatures, most people didn't even know that this thing, I mean, it's quite dodgy how they even got it to be voted in through the parliament, but people aren't even aware of that. And I think the most important thing that EUSA could do is raise the awareness in the student population about this issue in the first place. And I'm not even talking about maybe initiating big campaigns, but simply just raising knowledge, I think, could massively lead to students then making their own initiatives on a further level.
Okay, so it's about raising awareness. It's not a big resource intensive. Okay, some more questions.
If I was a student publishing in my capacity as a student, would this not affect me under those circumstances?
So it does directly affect students.
Yes, well, it does affect students in a way that whatever you write, you might be, whatever information you want to present, it does affect you. But I don't understand what's the bigger point that you're trying to raise. What I'm trying to say, yes, this will impact on the way how we can exchange information, and that's why it's important to do something about it in one way or the other. But I don't know if there's anything more that you're trying to get out of me.
I think she was actually agreeing with you. So again, it directly affects students, man.
I'd like to see some examples of ways in which it would. I think that people do stuff in their capacity as students, or it affects them as students in a range of ways. There's no doubt about that. And if we wanted to go down that road and definition of I did stuff as a student, there'd be no end to the things that we could be campaigning and doing stuff on. I think that knowledge exchange is really important. I think that a lot of the issues you've raised are absolutely right. But it's something which I don't think we can necessarily take a harsh stance on. We should be promoting good practice of knowledge exchange on campus. And actually, if raising awareness of this issue is something you feel strongly about, I don't think EUSA policy on the matter is going to be something that particularly
Perhaps policy is not needed. Okay, there's a hand here that you haven't spoken from the floor before, so...
Mine's kind of more of a technical point. If you didn't know what ACTA was until like 2 minutes ago, how can you now sit there and say that it's not going to affect students and that we shouldn't campaign for it if you don't know anything about it?
I don't think that's quite a technical point.
No,
You
I'm happy to respond to it. It's in relation to the stuff about Philippa gave me a very brief outline on it before and said that it was important I spoke to it because it wasn't really something which we as a charity could really be campaigning on. And I realise now that it's the thing that's been in the news for ages about Wikipedia and about knowledge exchange and all the stuff that's going on about that. Is it not?
No, that's completely different.
So, Philippa, can I ask you why you asked me to come up and speak against it?
Yeah, I think some clarification here as the man who presented the question in the first place would be useful.
I haven't...
Matt, stop talking.
I think for the sake of our president, I might give a brief explanation of what was happening in the world behind our eyes. So, in recent times in the US, various different policies were discussed, put into practice. Let's skip course number 1021 at all for today. But there was a thing called SOPA and there was a thing called PIPA, which were of a slightly similar nature to this, but were more concerned with just the internet. ACTA, on the other hand, is concerned with any form of knowledge exchange, and it's not limited to the US only, but it's worldwide to whomever signs up to it. So this is not only a case of the knowledge that we exchange on the internet, this is knowledge that we exchange between ourselves, what we teach each other, and so forth and so forth. the Wikipedia protests and the Dinosaur Comics and many other more known website protests specifically against SOPA at that time, which is a related issue, but it's not exactly the same thing.
Well, can I respond briefly to that?
Briefly respond to you.
Yeah, I mean, nothing that I've said, sorry, I appreciate your concern, but nothing that I said was in relation to any detail of what the proposer was talking about. I only said that it was because it was to do with legislation which was not to do with necessarily students in their capacity as students. And the things that I was saying was that it was not an issue that people were banging their door down about, and that if raising awareness was the key aspect of this motion, then it doesn't need to be done through a policy or through referendum. So I haven't spoken with any experience or knowledge of what this is about. I just thought it'd be good to give another side as well.
Okay, so simply not a priority. Okay.
To give a bit of a kind of context to this and why it is an issue for students, if you are from a country that does not sign up to ACTA, then you will be subject to trade sanctions. Your country will be subject to trade sanctions from the US and from the other signatories, which means that your country's economy may not be able to actually sustain you as a student through student loans and other such things. We're also getting into the realm of, if you've been following the news, there was the chap who down south that created the TV Links website. He's now been extradited to the US. In this country, what he did was completely legal and that he didn't host any copyrighted content. He is now, as a student, when he created this, has been extradited to the US and will face criminal procedures which face up to 20 years in jail, which in this country is perfectly legal. This is some of the issues that are coming out through ACTA, and this is why that we should actually be taking a stance against it. If we're going to argue that this type of issue doesn't affect students, then we can't be arguing about graduate employment, because that isn't an issue that affects them while they are a student. The other things that come into the academic realm are also the terms of publishing models through journal companies and all the rest of it, which severely restrict people's access to that copyrighted information. If we as students want to take an issue on this, we should be campaigning to change the model, the publishing model of companies that make their money through knowledge exchange. This legislation on ACTA is going to severely restrict any type of changes in the future because of bureaucratic manoeuvring by US government mainly.
Okay, we're running out of time, so there was a few interesting points there. For me, the most interesting one was the rule of thumb that if you only campaign on things that affect students as students, you shouldn't be doing anything on graduate employment. Matt, I'm sure you've got an opinion on that.
Not really, Graham. Other than to say I've been overwhelmingly convinced by the very good arguments that have been put forward in the last few minutes as to why this is an issue to do with students, and that being told to come up and say that this is something we shouldn't be campaigning on was something that was probably not accurate. I think that this is to do... What? I'm going to use my minute allowance to take heckling from the floor. Was there a particular reason, honestly, to do with trustees, that this was something...
No, it was a personal opinion that I thought we'd have a debate about this issue.
For goodness sake. Right, okay. Well, actually, can I say that I've been overwhelmingly convinced by the very good arguments that have been put across. I think it's fantastic that you're raising awareness of this issue. You've certainly raised awareness of it to me. And I would encourage all of you watching at home, in your thousands I'm sure, to vote yes for this particular issue. Have a great night. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, one very last brief question, since we are running out of time. I don't think you have spoken before, so I will take your word. Sorry, Callum, but you've been on it quite a lot before.
What about the fact that ACTA protects people against counterfeit pharmaceutical goods that are sold over the internet? For instance, I could buy something that I think is, ibuprofen, okay, very simple, buy ibuprofen off of an online pharmacy, but it turns out it's like crack. I don't know, it's talcum powder, it's something dangerous, it's rat poison. It's protecting people from counterfeit goods, which if you've lived in a third world country, you go down to the local bodega, you can get some very questionable things, not just Jennifer Lopez movies, but general things. This is protecting people from counterfeit goods, which come from some countries where this is not regulated, where governments take a blind eye. I understand it's preventing the exchange of information in some context, but it's also protecting people who are using the internet because we are a global economy now.
Okay, so basically if House endorses this policy, they're encouraging people to buy crack. Excellent.
Well, skipping aside that you would make a damn good deal if you did that. Yes, so there is actually a couple of examples that go to that, and although I might not know a great deal, most of the drugs, I mean pharmaceuticals, I'm sorry, that used to be sold to the third world were produced in Brazil, and I'm talking about the generic drugs, along the lines of ibuprofen, to be frankly enough. And with all this current hot heat going around, all those counterfeiting agreements, many of the, let's call them Western, although I don't like those type of labels, companies did put pressure on the Brazilian companies to stop producing them, and hence they actually ended up depriving the third world of the drugs that might have been of some use to them. Thank you.
So, crack.
Well, it's funny you bring this up, Grim. So, I think that there are a few bad drugs bought and sold online. I think there are lots of criminal things that go on with illegal drugs. I think that it's almost as criminal as the legal and above board pharmaceutical companies that operate in this country and across the Western world. I've been utterly, as ever, convinced and impressed with your overwhelmingly good arguments in relation to the question, and I submit myself to that argument.
Thank you very much. Okay, let us finish. Can we get a massive round of applause for our two participants, please?